These are the vocabs for the vocab words for vocab number 3. So I'll be going over them here since we might not have time next week to go over them much. Fortitude is the first one, and fortitude simply means strength, usually strength of character. So it takes great fortitude to admit when you're wrong. You can think of fort like a fort has to be strong to protect against invaders, or a fortress, same thing. So fortitude. Arid just means dry. So a desert is arid, obviously. Just anything that's very dry. A climate could be arid, like that. Abhor means to hate something or someone, whatever. So you might have an abhorrence to a certain person or a certain class or something, but you might abhor vegetables or broccoli, whatever. Anything that you don't like is, to abhor something. Anachronism. Anachronism is a great word. It's not anachronism. I once said it like that. It's not. It comes from chron, which of course comes from the Greek god of time, Chronos. So that's what it means. An anachronism is something out of its proper time. So I gave the example in class that it'd be like someone in the movie Titanic having a cell phone. That they didn't even exist back then. So it would be an anachronism for her to have one, if that makes sense. The adjective would be anachronistic. So if you ever see that was an anachronistic choice or something, that's what that would mean. Next, we have tenacious. Tenacious means stubborn, but usually in a good way. Like, for instance, the student was tenacious because even when she didn't understand a concept, she didn't stop trying until she got it. The noun is tenacity. So I might say, I admire your tenacity. You sure don't give up, do you? So tenacious, tenacity. Then we have diligent. This is a great all-purpose word, and it describes many of my students, especially these in this class, but it just means hardworking. So if a student is diligent, that means she's hardworking. The noun would be diligence. So when I'm writing college recommendation letters, I write this a lot. I write, that this student's diligence will help her succeed in any environment, which is a good thing. We have digress, which means to get off topic or to stray from the main point. So usually people say this when they're chatting and they get off topic and then they say, but I digress. And then they come back to what they were saying. I've been known to do this. We all do sometimes. And the noun would be digression. So I'd say, well, that was a nice digression, but let's get back to the main point. So digress, digression. Collaborate. That's a Laurelton, value, so I hope you know it. Just think of co-labor. It means to work together with labor, so with work. So if you collaborate with people in a group project, you're working with them, right? Collaboration is obviously just the noun form. So, one of our values is collaboration, so we try to stress that as much as we can. Bias is an often misunderstood word. Bias itself is a noun, so it's a person, place, or thing. So you might have bias. However, you can be biased towards something or against something. The same rule applies to prejudice and prejudice, which are the synonyms for these words. You have a prejudice or prejudice, but you are prejudiced. So the D is what makes both words adjectives. But bias means prejudice and biased means prejudiced, if that makes sense. Okay. Conformist. A conformist is someone who conforms, meaning they go along with other people. So they kind of follow the crowd. They're a follower, is what you could put. So a conformist is going to want to be like everybody else. A non-conformist is obviously not going to be a follower. They're going to be their own person. They're not necessarily a leader, but they're just at least not a follower. Remorse. Remorse just means guilt. So we've all unfortunately felt remorse when we do something bad, or we felt remorseful, which would be the adjective. And it's not a pleasant feeling, but sometimes it wakes us up to things we have to do, right? So, abundant. If something is abundant, it's plentiful. The noun would be abundance. So at Thanksgiving, we celebrate the abundance that the pilgrims had at their first feast. Someone might have abundant hair or, abundant supply, something like that. It just means a lot of or plentiful. Wrath, usually here in the Old Testament, it just means rage or fury, so anger basically. God is often described in the Old Testament as being wrathful, meaning very angry or full of rage or furious. And of course the Puritans focused on that word a lot. Callous means insensitive or unfeeling. So if you think of like calluses that you get on your hand, it's kind of the same thing. So it's basically your hands trying to toughen up so they don't get hurt. And that's what we are when we're callous. We're basically insensitive to other people. So you might say, I don't mean to sound callous, but it just means insensitive. Mimicry just means imitation. So the verb is mimic. So we all mimic our parents. When we learn to speak, that's how we learn to speak. You know, mimicry helps us learn. Ostentatious. That's a great one. That means showy, gaudy, or flashy. So I kept mentioning in class, Gatsby, right? So you think of his car, his house. He's very ostentatious. He likes to show off. He's very flashy. Nothing is understated. So if you think of the House of Mirth, we talked about how Lily doesn't like ostentatious displays of wealth. She likes the subtler manifestations. So she wouldn't like ostentatious stuff. Expunge just means to erase or eradicate. Usually it's about records. Like, for instance, something might be expunged off your record. So the past tense would just be expunged. Obsequious. Obsequious means servile or fawning. So someone who, like, bends over backwards to, like, you know, make a big deal about someone. I mentioned Peter Pettigrew in Harry Potter. Just anyone who's like a servant, like, oh, master, yes, and very humble and like over the top. Not just someone who's polite, but someone who's like fawning all over someone else is obsequious. Panacea is a cure-all. So it's like a remedy for all ills. So you often hear it in the negative, such as, I know this isn't a panacea, but... and then somebody will suggest something that's kind of a solution. So, like, as, you know, unfortunately right now there's no panacea for cancer. I wish there were. So even, you know, chemotherapy or certain drugs, those aren't panaceas. They're just kind of, you know, treatments. And then the final word is spurious. We're going to hear a lot of spurious accusations in the Crucible. It just means false, but designed to seem plausible. So you can just put false on the quiz, but a spurious allegation or accusation is just false. So of course that's what all the accusations in Salem were, unfortunately. So those are the vocab words for number 3, vocab number 3.